I'm sure if you've been following the Idaho case, you've already seen this clip and the others that are out there, right? This is from a channel called Officer Axon, and it is apparently of the DoorDash driver from the night of the King Road murders that happened on November 13th of 2022, where 4 University of Idaho students were brutally murdered. They were stabbed to death. So their names are Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, and Xana Kernodle. So if this is the DoorDash driver and she says that she saw Bryan there, the state will definitely want this person to testify, because that would obviously place him at the scene. So just in case you haven't seen this, just quickly check this out. It's like just a few seconds, right? Look.
Murder case too, so yeah, because I'm the DoorDash driver, so yeah.
You have to testify in which murder case?
Murder case for the college girl.
Oh.
I'm a DoorDash driver, I saw Bryan there.
She says, I'm the DoorDash driver. I saw Bryan there. Damn, and I wonder how. If she saw, actually, Bryan Kohberger there, did he have a balaclava on? Because that's apparently how he went into the house, according to the state's allegations, right? Like, in what state? What was he doing? I don't know. Did she park right next to him? Did she see him? What was he doing? Did they look at each other? I don't know. Did she see bushy eyebrows? It's going to be very interesting testimony, right? I know a lot of people are questioning her credibility, and let's just hope that she will be okay to testify and will be able to remember what she saw and all of that, right? Okay, so now let's quickly go over some of the latest updates. If you're brand new here and you haven't yet followed the case, welcome. My name is Grizzly K. If you expand the description box, you just click more, there's a case background right up there for you. And then you can find the link to the playlist. And there are all the videos with the deep dives, timelines, presentations, documents, and everything to catch up on the case. But today, I really just want to offer you, what the new information, what's happened since we last spoke about this. Please note that this content is for adults only. Viewer discretion advised. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe, like, and share. The last time we actually spoke about this case, I think, is when we watched the hearing together, where the defense had a motion to continue the trial. They wanted to postpone it, and then also they wanted to present their alternate perpetrator theory. So now, today's date is June 27th of 2025. The judge has finally made his rulings, and we're going to discuss that right here today, as well as some interesting witnesses that might be coming out of Pennsylvania to this trial. Of course, that's still to be decided whether they will have to, because they might have to pack their bags and go. And as we know, this is a long trial. It's a 2-phase trial. Bryan Kohberger, the suspect, is facing the death penalty. So the first phase of the trial will be the guilt or innocence phase, and the next phase would obviously be, whether he's going to be sentenced to death or not if he's convicted. If he's not convicted in the first phase, of course, there won't be a second phase. Either way, we'll be watching this trial together, so make sure you are subscribed. Sometimes YouTube will automatically unsubscribe you, so just check, put your notifications on, and let's continue to follow the developments leading up to this trial actually starting. And yeah, Judge Hippler, he is not playing around. There are no more delays. He's like, we're done. We're going to trial, and it's happening this year. So are you surprised? I'm a little surprised, actually. I thought maybe they will delay it a little bit again, but thankfully, not. Okay, so Judge Hippler has denied the defense's motion to continue the trial. The old trial date was, jury selection was set for July 30th of 2025, and opening statements were going to start on August 11th of 2025, and there they said the trial would run until November 7th of 2025. But now the new trial date says jury selection is going to start on August 4th of 2025, and opening statements are expected to start on August 18th of 2025, and the trial will continue until completed, is how the judge worded that. I'm like, whoa, it could even be longer than before, right? It could go, I don't know, would it be the whole of November? Are we going to Christmas? I don't know. We'll have to see what happens, and of course, that's also based, again, on if Bryan Kohberger is convicted or not. Now, if you want to know a lot about Bryan Kohberger, I have a lot of videos on that, his background, the timelines, his history, just everything. Of course, also updates and recaps from the Dateline episodes, which I think they're still investigating. Who leaked that information and all of that? We haven't heard back about that. If we hear anything, of course, I'll keep you posted. Okay, so let's look at this alternate perpetrator theory, which the judge has denied. So I think we'll probably never know who the defense wanted to present to the jury as what they thought was viable alternate perpetrators. Other people who committed the crimes, according to them, rather than Bryan Kohberger, the state's suspect. So Bryan Kohberger's defense team attempted to introduce evidence of 4 alternate perpetrators, but Judge Hippler has rejected this theory, dealing a significant blow to their strategy. Were you surprised when you heard, or if you hear it now for the first time, that they had 4 alternate perpetrators to present? I was a little surprised. I thought it might be 1 or 2. But yeah, they say 4, and we're going to go into what they said. So the defense submitted offers of proof identifying 4 individuals as potential alternate perpetrators, but conceded during oral arguments, which was sealed, right? We watched the hearing together, the public part, but then when they went to talk about the alternate perpetrators, that was sealed. And we were so wanting to see it, just to know, well, what are the arguments? Who are they presenting as these other suspects? So here they said, but they conceded during those sealed oral arguments that the evidence currently does not meet the standard set by State versus Meister, which this is all linked in the documents. I've also put the source to the documents in the description box. This ruling significantly limits the defense's ability to present an alternate perpetrator theory at trial, but preserves their right to challenge the investigation's scope through cross-examination. So that's going to be very interesting to see, how they work all of that. So these 4 alternate perpetrators are listed in the document as 3 individuals who had social connections to the victims, interacted with them before the homicides, lived near the crime scene, and were familiar with the victim's home. So I was thinking the way that they worded it in the document was that they were referring to people at the frat house or, at the frat party or something like that. But I see a lot of online speculation also includes one of the victims, Kaylee Goncalves' ex-boyfriend, and that also makes sense that people would think that the defense would present him as an alternate perpetrator, especially because Kaylee and Maddie had called him multiple times right before the murders occurred, which is really, really sad. But remember, the judges denied this, so we're not going to hear any of this at the trial. So, however, they said there was no evidence of motive, means, or presence at the crime scene, which is why the judges denied this. They cooperated with law enforcement, apparently providing DNA samples and allowing searches, and the DNA was excluded from the crime scene. That one is interesting because how did they do that? Do they mean from the knife sheath, or did they mean just because the crime scene, it's 2 floors of the house, and this house was a party house. And these people that are familiar with the home, obviously the DNA would be in the home, which essentially would be at the crime scene. So that must have been a lot of hard work to exclude them from crime scene evidence, or they're just saying that they're just not viable alternate perpetrators. The 4th alternate perp theory was about a person who had a brief non-contact interaction with one victim 5 weeks prior, captured on surveillance. So that was apparently, we can look at the document just to go more into that, at a store. And this person was trying to build up the courage to talk to one of the victims and then kind of followed them and maybe looked a little shady and then didn't talk to them. I wonder if that could have been Kaylee Goncalves, because her dad had mentioned that she felt like she was being followed or stalked or something like that in the weeks, leading up to the murder. So that's interesting as well. But he also cooperated with law enforcement, and his DNA was excluded from the crime scene. So yeah, we won't be hearing from them. Then the DoorDash witness, which is the clip that we looked at right at the beginning, right? The DoorDash driver is a key witness expected to testify at the trial. She was pulled over by police on September 4th of 2024 for expired registration on the truck she was driving. She was suspected of driving under the influence of prescription medications and was eventually arrested for DUI and was transported to the Pullman police station. She's a 44-year-old woman from Moscow, Idaho, who has not been publicly named in court documents to protect her identity. She's referred to by her initials MM in some filings, and she claims to have been the DoorDash driver who delivered food, which was apparently Jack in the Box, to the victim Xana Kernodle at the off-campus home at 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho, around 4 a.m. I think it was 3:59 a.m., but around 4 a.m. on November 13th of 2022, minutes before the murders occurred. And she says she parked right next to Bryan. So I've seen a lot of people say it's interesting that she just refers to him as Bryan, not like Bryan Kohberger or the suspect or anything. So there's speculation, did she know Bryan? Apparently she knows the prosecutor, Bill Thompson. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, right, what she says at the trial. It will be interesting, I think. And if she saw literally Bryan Kohberger there, what did it look like? Was it in the dark? Could you see his face? Did you see bushy eyebrows? Did he have a balaclava on or what? So prosecutors likely see her testimony as critical because it establishes a timeline of events before the murders. Her observation of who she believes to be Bryan Kohberger and obviously the vehicle that he would then be in could place him at the scene, strengthening the prosecution's case, which also relies on DNA evidence from a knife sheath and surveillance data. It's interesting, the previous document said the only living witness to have seen the suspect was DM, one of the surviving roommates, or the unharmed roommates, but that's actually not true then if she also saw Bryan Kohberger, right? Unless it just meant people in the house. I don't know. Depends on the wording, of course, in these previous documents, but wow, that would make two people then, DM and the DoorDash driver that potentially saw Bryan Kohberger at the crime scene. So the defense had previously objected to introducing DoorDash records. That was in 2024, suggesting that they may challenge her testimony. So they probably already knew about this, right? They may also question her credibility due to the DUI-related traffic stop, as police noted that she appeared to be under the influence during her statements. The defense has claimed that BK, Bryan Kohberger, was driving alone and stargazing that night conflicts with her account, and they may argue mistaken identity or insufficient evidence. I mean, that could be what they would argue for both this person and for DM, right? Because not that much information that we know so far beyond the bushy eyebrows that DM saw. In Pennsylvania, that's where Bryan Kohberger is from, where he was arrested as well at his parents' house when he was there for the holidays, right? Because he was studying at Washington State University. He was getting his PhD in criminology, but then he went home after the murders had occurred to spend time with his family. So now, Pennsylvania witnesses, several potential key witnesses have been summoned to appear at a hearing on June 30th of 2025 to determine if they must testify in Idaho. There's a typo. William Searfoss is one of them, a corrections officer at the Monroe County Correctional Facility in Pennsylvania, where Bryan Kohberger was held after his arrest on December 30th of 2022, and of course before his extradition to Idaho. So he's expected to testify about Kohberger's behavior during his brief detention. Now, all of these witnesses, from my understanding, everything that I can find, these are being called by the defense, which tells me that it's probably for the second phase of the trial. If Bryan Kohberger is convicted, then they will call these people as character witnesses for the mitigating factors in the case against Kohberger to decide whether or not he'll be sentenced to death or not. So Anthony Soma is another one, a graduate of the Monroe Career and Technical Institute, where Kohberger participated in a youth law enforcement program. Jesse Harris, the owner of, associated with a boxing gym in Pennsylvania, where BK trained daily, which was noted on a 2015 job application. His testimony could highlight Kohberger's discipline and physical fitness, as Kohberger wrote that boxing helped him to develop these traits. The defense may use this to portray a positive aspect of his character or routine, countering the prosecution's narrative of him as a calculated killer. Ann Parham has been newly added to the list of people who are going to this hearing on June 30th of 2025 in Pennsylvania to decide if they should pack their bags and head to Idaho for the trial for whenever it will be that they will testify. I mean, that could possibly be in the second phase of the trial, and I would assume. So that could be, who knows, in October, maybe? So she is apparently an advisor at a school that Kohberger attended, likely Northampton College, Community College, or DeSales University. Her testimony may focus on Kohberger's academic performance or behavior during his studies, potentially to show his dedication or normalcy as a student. This could support the defense's efforts to present a mitigating narrative. And then Marie Bolger was on the list, but her name's been replaced by this person, Brandon Andriola. So Marie is a former professor at DeSales University. She taught Kohberger during his master's degree in criminal justice, primarily via email and Zoom due to the pandemic. She described him as one of her brightest students, recommending him for a PhD program. She said he was one of 2 people that she recommended in 10 years for the PhD program. Her name was later replaced by Brandon Andriola in some filings, possibly indicating a substitution or an error. I'm not too sure. If Marie Bolger testifies, she would likely focus on Kohberger's academic work, particularly his thesis on how and why criminals commit their crime. And remember that survey that he did, she would probably normalize that, of course, because it would be part of his normal studies at that point, which prosecutors plan to use to show his knowledge of the crime scene handling and evidence transfer. The defense might use it to highlight his intellectual capabilities or lack of criminal behavior during this period. And then there's these other names, Ralph Vecchio and Maggie Sanders, and their connections at this point are not quite clear, like how they know Kohberger, were they family friends, where do they know him from? I'm not too sure, but they are also expected to be at that hearing to decide whether or not they're going to have to testify at the trial, right? So now let me just quickly show you this document so that we can just look at that part, especially with that 4th alternate perpetrator. 3 of the individuals were each socially connected to one or more of the victims, interacted with one or more of the victims at social events in the hours prior to the homicide, lived within walking distance of the crime scene, and were familiar with the layout of the victim's home from prior social events. While perhaps this evidence could suggest an opportunity to commit the crime, which no doubt is an opportunity shared by dozens of others in the victim's social circles, there's no compelling evidence that any of them had motive to kill the victims, much less physically harm them or means to do so. Further, there's no evidence connecting them to the crime scene. They have each cooperated with law enforcement, providing DNA samples, fingerprints, and allowing searches as requested. Notably, lab testing has excluded their DNA from samples taken from the crime scene and victims. The 4th individual did not know the victims, but had a passing connection to one of them while noticing her shopping at a store approximately 5 weeks prior to the homicides. He followed her briefly out of the exit of the store while considering approaching her to talk. He turned away before ever speaking to her. The event was captured on surveillance camera. This individual subsequently cooperated with law enforcement. Can you imagine what a fright this person got? I was just trying to talk to this lady. I just didn't have the courage. I was trying to, but what? Now here's law enforcement. I bet he won't do that again. The event was captured on surveillance cameras, so I don't know if we'll ever see that. Probably not. The individual subsequently cooperated with law enfortement, providing his phone number and a DNA sample. As with the other alleged alternative perpetrators, lab reports excluded his DNA from the samples taken from the crime scene and victims, and there's no evidence connecting him to the crime scene. So that is how they worded that, of course. And this is just the rest of the document. It's a 7-page document, and so yeah, the judge completely rejected the defense's attempts to bring in an alternative suspect theory. So that is all that we have for today. That is the recap for now. That's where everything stands. Now we know when the trial date is set to start, so we can hopefully see the opening statements on August 18th of 2025. I say that because the judge said, obviously, when the jury selection will start, and he anticipates that opening statements will be on August 18th. I do hope it will be so. Maybe it'll be sooner for all we know. We'll see. But yeah, that will probably be the next big trial that we follow, and it's going to be very interesting to watch. So I really hope that there will be justice for the 4 victims and their families. I know their families are also working very hard to try to get to this trial, try to plan everything. I was thinking about that, meaning imagine if the motion was granted And then imagine if the families had already booked like accommodation and planned everything and asked for time off work. At least now it's just a minor adjustment and they will hopefully be able to be there. All right, so I'll keep you posted. Let's see what else happens. Let's see if they ever find who leaked the information to Dateline. That should be interesting as well. I mean, in the meantime, there's books coming out. There's other documentaries also coming out. So yeah, I agree actually with the judge. The sooner the trial starts, the better. And of course, it's been quite some time. The crime happened on November 13th of 2022. So let's see where we go from here. In the meantime, stay safe and I'll see you in the next one.